monumental day in the WNBA cast because it was announced that 3 new franchises will be added to the league over the course of the next couple of years. By 2030, the WNBA will have 18 teams. So Detroit, Philadelphia, and Cleveland will be joining the fold. What does this mean just from a league growth standpoint, in your opinion?
Kathy Engelbert talked in New York on Monday about it taking them through the end of the decade. And there was so much interest in bids, which makes sense because people see the dollar signs, right? It's a lucrative business to be in. These franchises, I think, notably will be held in NBA arenas by NBA teams, which seems to be a focus with amenities and things like that. But adding 3 teams is going to affect everything that the WNBA does moving forward.
And exactly, just to break it down, exactly what that affects moving forward. Obviously, it's more teams, schedules look different, new rivalries are going to form, but the league is currently negotiating a new CBA, roster sizes, and salary cap. How does adding 3 new teams over the course of 5 years, including Toronto and Portland that are joining the league next year, so 5 more teams over the span of the next 5 years, what does all of that mean for the current CBA in expansion?
6 and 6 years with Golden State, right?
You're right, 6 and 6,
Totally
yes.
crazy. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Kathy talked about how it impacted the CBA a little bit or didn't talk about it. This was done separate of the CBA. She felt like it was the right time. But certainly we've been talking about the schedule, as you mentioned, and kind of how it's packed in. I think that's going to have to change, and that's going to be a CBA negotiation. When do you start the season? When do you end the season? Are players going to push for restrictions on what a schedule looks like? And then you have roster limits, which we've talked about too, like 11 to 12 players on a team. There's a lot of different conversations about if that's a good number, if you should expand the rosters. But what Kathy has always said she wanted to do was reach more markets and thereby open up the same amount of roster spots or more. I think it's like 60, 70. It's going to be a lot more talent. So that will be in the CBA as well. And they'll have to negotiate all of these things, keeping in mind that there are so many teams coming on board. Like one of the things I'm thinking about is the expansion draft, basically every single year until we get to 2030.
And so many great opportunities for players that, like right now, roster sizes in the WNBA are so small that there are very good players that could be role players on any given roster that don't make a roster because there just simply is not room. So not only wonderful opportunities for those players to get a W opportunity, but also wonderful opportunities for these expansion teams to add really solid players. I mean, you look at the Golden State Valkyries. We went into this season saying, oh, it's their first year. They're going to experience growing pains. They don't have one star player. It's a roster full of role players. But the Golden State Valkyries have impressed as of late. So I think that should be encouraging to Portland and Toronto coming in next year. And then, of course, the recent news, Cleveland will be joining in 2028. That's one of the greatest sports cities in America, and it's a former WNBA city. The Cleveland Rockers were there in the late 90s and early 2000s. Detroit joining in 2029, formerly the Shock, and then they moved to Tulsa, and now ultimately the Dallas Wings. So Detroit is getting a team back. They were there in the 90s and early 2000s as well, and then Philly joining the field as well. I mean, Cleveland, Philly, Detroit, those are 3 of the best sports cities in America, places where basketball is huge. They're rabid basketball fans in those 3 cities. And we have seen with the Golden State Valkyries, obviously, a very big basketball town as well with a very deep and rich, basketball history. They've been welcomed with open arms. I mean, the Golden State Valkyries are now the highest valued team in the WNBA. And I was actually having this conversation with people who are not as into the W, and their sentiment was, well, if it's a league that's not making money, why are they continuing to expand? I don't think that people realize how much money the W is worth and how it has experienced a meteoric growth in just the past couple of years. I think the most shocking statistic that I have seen, Mark Davis, of course, owner of the Vegas Raiders, bought the Las Vegas Aces for $2 million in 2021, 4 years ago. Today, the Las Vegas Aces are worth $290 million. So you can say whatever you want about the WNBA if you don't think that it makes money, so on and so forth. A team is worth whatever anyone is willing to pay for it. So the Las Vegas Aces now, I mean, profited $288 million over the last 4 years, and then you're adding these 4 teams that are paying a $250 million expansion fee. That's 5 times what the Golden State Valkyries bought into the WNBA. So I think all of these dollars and cents just prove how valuable the WNBA is and how eager and willing millionaires and billionaires are to be part of it.
Mark Davis kind of set, I would say, like, not to overuse the word blueprint, but like was interested in women's basketball, got into the game early, built the facility, took care of the players, found his way around the CBA with loopholes, or is under investigation for maybe not finding his way around the CBA.
But he tried.
He tried. He tried, and he cared, and he like showed this, I don't want to say proof of concept, but it's definitely kind of like in vogue to own a WNBA team, to be involved. And I think it's notable, as I said, that it's NBA franchises getting involved and doing it. I think the pessimist in me is concerned that, I don't know. I don't think there's going to be a downturn, if you will, in a decade like we saw in the early years of the W. But I think for a lot of us who know the history, there is the pessimist in me who wonders how long they're going to hold on when there are down years or there's a recession or the newness kind of wears off. Because as incredible as Golden State has been, I don't know that they're going to sell out every single game for the rest of their existence. And so I hope that these franchises that are coming in are incredibly serious about growing the product consistently through great times like now and through bad times, just as they do with their men's teams, to really help this league flourish. Because 6 teams coming in 6 years, this is the biggest the league will have ever been.
And it's fair to acknowledge that it is more likely than not that this league is going to experience growing pains. Mm-hmm. Whenever you grow so much, so quickly, and it has seemed like the growth of the WNBA wasn't just a slow growth over time, it was kind of an overnight kind of growth. I mean, we just saw in 4 years, the value of the Las Vegas Aces going from $2 million to $290 million, which frankly I can't even wrap my mind around. So it's fair, yeah, money. So it's fair to assume that there will be growing pains. I think this is now, the onus is on the owners, the onus is on the players, and the onus is on the league to say what we have built is remarkable, it is unprecedented, but we're not done yet. We can have this foundation that Caitlin Clark has helped build, that these rivalries, the Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese rivalry that we had from college to the W, to this exposure and popularity that we've seen bridge that gap between college and the W, that we're now seeing, with a Paige Beckers or a Sonia Citron or a Kiki Uriafin, so on and so forth. That's all been a wonderful jumping off point and a wonderful foundation to build upon it, to make sure that this growth isn't just something that happens in this decade and kind of stops and stalls and regresses. The onus is on the players, the owners, and really on the league to continue to build upon that.
I asked Kathy about if the league is involved at all with timelines or pressing these expansion teams on when they get things done, right? So like we talked about branding a couple weeks ago with the Valkyries, which was huge. And the Cleveland ownership group had told me that they've been, closely watching Golden State and what they've been able to do. Cleveland was the only one to announce merch on Monday, so they're a little more advanced than the rest. But Kathy said, they keep in contact with these expansion teams, but there is no timeline. They're not telling them what to do. And I almost wonder if, to your point, it would be a good idea to say, like, this many months-ish in, you should really have a GM in place. You should really have branding. You should really be doing this, because as we're seeing with Portland, still no branding. I mean, they're tipping off in less than a year.
And
And
Toronto's had branding for months now. We know the
yeah,
team name and the colors and the logos and what the uniforms are going to look like. They're coming in at the same time.
and like as we started this conversation talking about the CBA, like I don't know this, but what's to say that the league doesn't start in April next year or start in March because of these negotiations? Like, I do think, to your point, the league would be wise to be a little bit more involved in getting all of this off the ground.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the Golden State Valkyries, the way that they did it, and of course that's recency bias on my part, but we knew the name and the logo and the colors and why they chose those colors. Those things are important for a new fan base to kind of latch on to. I am curious. Now, I just said like Detroit, Philly, Cleveland, those are some of the greatest sports cities that we have in this country. But those aren't the only ones, and those weren't the only cities that put bids in for a WNBA franchise. Was that a discussion with Kathy Engelbert at the press conference of why those three cities?
She talked about just, them being good spots. They met all of her demographics. The one team that she mentioned herself in the press conference was Houston.
Yeah.
They had the Houston Comets 4 championships in 4 years to start the league. She was asked point blank, "Are you announcing them as the next expansion team?" She said no, but they had a good bid. The Nashville team, I
Tennessee
thought,
Summit.
yep, kind of, which is super fun. Talk about history.
Yeah, it's a hat tip and an homage to Pat Summit. The colors would have been orange and baby blue, just like the Lady Vols. I mean, I live in Nashville. I can personally attest that there is a lot of love and appreciation and support for women's basketball, not just in the city, but in the state.
Yeah, and I thought their statement Monday night really hit the nail on the head when they said these three teams were given to NBA franchises. In terms of the three that came in as well, the hotbed of women's basketball, Cleveland talked about success of the Final Four a couple years ago, and they've done other women's kind of events. Philadelphia, rabid basketball base.
Sports fan base.
Yes.
It's kind of scary, but in a good way, I guess.
On the topic of Philadelphia, Kathy Engelbert is from the city, obviously, and Philadelphia. The reporters in Philadelphia have done a great job the last few years of just asking and asking and asking about the Philadelphia bid. She said herself at the press conference, knowing those of us who were there, that she was glad to not have to answer the question anymore. But when she was asked if her being from Philadelphia helped at all, she did say that it was more about the corridor and like building, as you said, the rivalries that she's always talking about, because that is what's marketable. That's what people want to see. That's going to boost attendance and viewership and interest and headlines and whatnot. So Philly, New York, Philly, Washington is kind of what she's looking at as a Mets fan. Makes sense.
And like those are rivalries that already exist amongst those cities. Sure. Like the Phillies and the Mets and the 76ers and the Knicks, like those rivalries already exist. But all of that to say, and we're talking about how do you build upon this growth? How do you maintain this level of growth? Well, there are more cities that are interested in being involved in the WNBA. So if this is something that the league wants to continue, there are bidders a la Houston, a la the state of Tennessee, and I'm sure there are several others that would be more than happy and more than willing and have the funds and have the support and have the vision for a team. So if this is something that the league continues to build upon, there is even more growth to be had. It's just up to the league and how much they want to take it. So exciting day, a monumental day in the WNBA on Monday, but let's move on to our halftime break. We're talking about the growth of the league. You cannot talk about the growth of the WNBA without talking about Caitlin Clark. She has been such a pivotal figure and a pivotal person in the growth of this league, and I think that what we saw in the release of her new shoe just attests to that. So her new shoe is a Kobe 5 Protro that came out earlier this past week. It was put on sale on the Nike website. Sold out in 10 minutes. In 10 minutes. That is crazy. Not to mention the amount of jerseys that Caitlin Clark has sold at Iowa and with the Fever. Yeah, Sophie Cunningham's jersey sold out by proxy of Caitlin Clark. So obviously the money that's being invested into the league, but the amount of money that's being spent on Caitlin Clark merchandise is absolutely insane, Kaz.
I always wonder when they have these sellouts, like how many have they made available? Because I don't know. It's been a long travel for me. Maybe I'm just in a pessimistic morning
You
mind.
have been going through it.
But
Everyone say a prayer for Cass, please.
it's rough out here, guys. Don't
It's
fly
been
in June.
brutal out here.
Um, I know like 4 or 5 years ago, it was just like a constant problem that there wasn't enough good merch. And then when there was, it sold out in 10 minutes. So I hope for the people who wanted shoes that they come back online.
I am with you there. I also think that, like, maybe historically, like WNBA merch, if I saw a demographic pie chart, I would assume that a large part of that pie chart was women. Women that were interested in fans of the league and representing other women. I don't know what the demographic of people who bought Caitlin Clark's shoe was, but I think there's probably a lot of men who buy Caitlin Clark merchandise, Caitlin Clark jerseys, and bought Caitlin Clark shoes. When we talk about the growth of the league, a big part of that is tapping in to new target markets and new demographics, and this is just one example of that.
Yeah, I need more
It was 13,000 pairs. I just did a little research.
Oh.
13,000 pairs.
Nice
I don't
pair.
know how that compares to other shoes. Maybe I should have done more shoe
13,000
research. But 13,000 pairs. That seems substantial, significant.
Don't people like buy them and then resell them at a higher price? They like snatch up a bunch.
Yeah, so they on the Nike website they were going for $190, and you can buy it on like the secondary market for $365.
Better save $1 every day of the year to buy the next shoe.
And maybe Caitlin Clark will have another shoe out there. But yeah, you can find it at Nike. It is the Kobe 5 Protro, and the colors are midnight navy, bright crimson, which I didn't even know that was a color, but you learn something new every day, with vibrant hints of university gold. From the Nike website, awfully fancy. They are cool shoes, but good for Caitlin Clark. All right, let's move on to the third quarter. All-star voting results are in. All-star starters starts with Aaliyah Boston, of course, from the Indiana Fever. Paige Becker's Dallas Wings. She is the only rookie starter on this All-Star team. So shouts out to Paige Becker's. Caitlin Clark, Indiana Fever. Nafisa Collier, Minnesota Lynx. Alicia Gray, Atlanta Dream. Sabrina Ionescu, New York Liberty. Nneka Ogwumike, Seattle Storm. Satu Sably, Phoenix Mercury. Brianna Stewart, New York Liberty. And Asia Wilson from the Las Vegas Aces. Now, those are your starters. That is not your entire All-Star team, but anything stand out to you there? Any snubs? Any surprises? Anything that you think is of note from this group of starters?
The biggest thing I noticed was I love to look at the breakdown of the fan rank, the media rank, and the player rank, because that's what goes into being a starter. Alicia Gray, who we had talked about last week as a potential MVP candidate, and I spoke with her in Atlanta. She really wanted her third All-Star. She finished first in the media rank and first in the player rank. So I thought that was pretty great for her.
The only other player to finish first in both the media and player rank is Asia Wilson.
Yes. So
good company.
Congrats to South Carolina. That's a sweep.
Congratulations to Dawn Staley, because, I mean, she's recruiting herself these days. The program recruits itself.
Yeah. I think it's really tough to vote for guards. I mean, it's tough to vote for everyone. I think the forward position is kind of jam-packed all the time. Collier, Wilson, Stewart, Boston, Ogwumike, I thought were like locks this year. Or most of them were locks. Satu reaching All-Star. Phoenix is doing really, really well. I'll be interested to see who the coaches vote in, though, as reserves, because Kiki Iriafen finished pretty high in the voting. Will coaches opt for her? Kelsey Plum finished 7th among guards, but her player rank is 16th, which a lot of people are pointing out. I do want to note about the player rank, and this is the same kind of idea as like fan voting. players are supposed to or have the option to submit a ballot, but not necessarily every player in the league does. And there have been instances where, for example, maybe much of a team doesn't vote or what have you. So just like fan rank, like this is skewed.
And I'm glad that you added that context because obviously, when Kelsey Plum finishes 6th in media and 16th in player rank, that's a pretty massive divide. I think what's getting the most buzz, though, is Caitlin Clark. I mean, anything Caitlin Clark does is going to get a lot of buzz, but she was the number 1 in fan rank. No surprise there. Number 3 by the media, which I think, when you were talking about Kelsey Plum and Natasha Cloud and Alicia Gray, who we talked about on a previous episode, which of course you can find on your preferred podcast platform and on the Yahoo Sports YouTube page, like Alicia Gray can put together an MVP caliber resume this season. Sabrina Ionescu in there, like having Caitlin Clark third, I don't think is egregious in the slightest, but she was 9th in player rank. That's also a pretty big divide. And now look, the conversation on, the first takes, the certain shows are the player attitude toward Caitlin Clark. When you see Caitlin Clark number 1 fan rank, number 3 media rank, and number 9 in player rank, what sticks out to you? What does that mean to you about Caitlin Clark and the way that her peers in the league views her?
Well, I think this year is a little complicated to highlight the player rank for her. And I don't remember it being out last year, which was kind of frustrating. Mm-hmm. But for Caitlin, there's certainly an argument to be made that she's only played in, half of the season, which for a lot of people would omit them, or maybe there are players, this was my thought, who are like, well, Caitlin clearly, as we saw and as we know, is going to win the fan vote. Like, I don't know if players actually think this, to be clear, but like, can I, just leave her off my ballot and maybe try and get votes for another teammate? I'm teammates with Kelsey Plum and I want her to get a bid, but maybe she's not high in the fan voting, so I'm trying to get her in. I think when it comes to Caitlin Clark, like, if you look at her numbers, they may be down. I haven't looked at them lately. She hasn't been in games, but it's not Caitlin's numbers that impacts the Fever. Like, she is so important to the Fever. If she's not scoring, she's finding other players. The gravity that she draws out, the defense, the attention, like, opens up others. And I think we're seeing that without her, Indiana is just kind of a boat without an oar.
Yeah. And we could see that, potentially become a more recurring topic over the span of this season. As of Tuesday, July 1st, when we're recording this podcast, Caitlin Clark has missed 7 games so far this season. That, is Caitlin Clark's availability, is Caitlin Clark's health going to be a concern moving forward? Not just a concern for her, but for the Indiana Fever, a team that went all in the offseason and basically told us, without saying as much, we want to win a championship. And I don't think, essentially they did. Yep, they did. They didn't mince any words about it, but I don't think that the Fever, from what we have seen, can win a championship without Caitlin Clark. So that's something fascinating to follow. Caitlin Clark, one of the captains of the All-Star team, Nafisa Collier, is the other one. And, of course, we'll see those two go head-to-head on Tuesday night in the Commissioner's Cup, as we touched on before. But let's transition into our fourth quarter. DeWanna Bonner waived from the Fever. Speaking of the Fever. So she was out for a couple of weeks for personal reasons, and then it was reported that she requested out of the Fever. So there's been a lot of speculation as to why exactly DeWanna Bonner wanted out of Indiana, but the fact remains that she is out. What happens next? Like, where in the league do you think would be a good fit for DeWanna Bonner?
At this point, she has presumably cleared waivers, so teams are available to pick her up and negotiate a deal. So if you have cap space, which is very hard to do in this league with hard cap space, and that's what players have been talking about when they are talking about the CB and what they want to see. If you have cap space, you can sign her. I think the report that we've all heard is kind of maybe she wants to join her fiance Alyssa Thomas in Phoenix, and that's a team that's doing really well. I think for a player like DeWanna Bonner, like first of all, she already has 2 WNBA championships that she won early in her career with Phoenix. Like she's not ring chasing per se, but at the end of her career, clearly she wants to be on a team that is faring well. I think, though, it's going to be, tricky maneuvering as we see all of the time for a team to sign a player of that caliber.
And I think that you can even watch, early games with DeWanna Bonner and the Fever. She's 37 years old. Like, let's put that out there. She's not the same player that she was 10 years ago. The way that Caitlin Clark wants to play, which of course is the way that the Fever plays, that she is their nucleus, they want to push the ball down the court. They want to be quick. They want to be fast moving. At 37 years old, that style of play might not fit DeWanna Bonner very well. Like that just doesn't highlight her strength. So I think it's probably a combination of style of play reasons, personal reasons, and yeah, like you said, at this point, she probably wants to win basketball games, make a little bit of money in the process, and have fun and enjoy herself. If at 37 years old in Indiana she's not having fun, well then like that's your priority at this point. So interesting to see like where she goes. I'm sure over the next couple of days as we head into the All-Star break, we'll start to hear some more rumblings about where DeWanna Bonner's landing spot could potentially be. So of course we'll keep you updated right here on Yahoo Sports. The other side of this though is the Fever. When DeWanna Bonner was out, we saw Lexi Hull come in, and she fits that style. She can hit the three. She's a scorer. It can keep up with that physicality. Is there anything more that you think the Fever need to do to fill that hole that was created when DeWanna Bonner was waived, or is Lexi Hull that player?
Well, Lexi Hull's success and continued success in the system with Caitlin from last year, I think was the big reason that DeWanna Bonner was moved to the bench at all and kind of trying to figure that out. When I went back through last week, just kind of like pouring over all of these press conferences and like public comments and like my interviews that I had done in Indiana, the thing that stuck out to me was the first day, I think, of training camp, DeWanna Bonner had mentioned like she had to catch her breath because these guys are fast.
Yeah.
And as you said, like Lexi plays fast. The other major thing that, waiving DeWanna Bonner did, which I do want to point out is also disappointing because she was brought on specifically as this veteran leader for Indiana. And everyone, at least publicly, spoke about how much her leadership mattered, how much they were listening to her. Like this has been, I don't want to say a problem in Indiana, but an issue for the last few years, something they've been trying to fill, that they want a veteran leader with championship experience. But by waiving her, what they were able to do is open up a little bit of cap space and a roster spot and re-sign Ari McDonald. And this is a player who does want to play in that pace, can fill in the void for Caitlin Clark because who knows how many more games she's going to miss moving forward. They'll probably look to boost their front court because they're a little shallow there, but they will get Damiris Dantas back here soon after all of these national team commitments wrap up.
Yeah, it will be a strategic decision because, like we said, Caitlin Clark has been in and out with injuries. Indiana is still going for it. Like they still see that they're a playoff team that can view themselves potentially as a championship team. So being strategic with that cap space and with some of these moves, I think is going to be, paramount for Indiana and what they do for the rest of the season. So those are the 4 quarters. Let's look up to next week. Well, first and foremost, we're starting with the Commissioner's Cup, Tuesday night, 8 o'clock Eastern time. Fever, Lynx. Lynx are playing at the Target Center at home in front of a home crowd. They have the potential to go back-to-back. Caitlin Clark's status, at least right now as we are recording, is still in question. But what are you watching for the Commissioner's Cup on Tuesday, Cass?
I think it's always a statement game for viewers. How good are the Lynx going to look with a championship on the line? Has their defense improved since the beginning of the season? If Caitlin plays, like how well are they able to shut her down and Aaliyah Boston and kind of take away their weapons? it's way more important, I think, for Indiana because for the most part, we know all of these things about Minnesota. I mean, they seem well on their way to reaching the finals. Indiana, to the point we've been making for quite a while now, like, can't figure out how to get above
Yeah.
500. At their best, they look like they could make the finals, but they haven't been their best enough. So if Caitlin plays, I want to see them. Kelsey Mitchell had said it the other day, like this is a gut check. Like we need to see how we stack up. I'm more interested in that than necessarily Minnesota probably going home with more cash.
Yeah, I mean, Minnesota feels like the most sure thing in the league right now. We've also got on Thursday, July 3rd, 4:30 p.m. Pacific time. So let me do my math. Is that 7:30 Eastern time? Sure.
What did you say? 4:30 Pacific?
Yeah. 7:30?
Yeah, 7:30.
Okay, sure. Time zone math is hard. Seattle Storm and Atlanta Dream. And then we've also got a Storm Liberty matchup on Sunday. A little matinee at 1 o'clock Eastern time. Anything stick out to you there, Cass?
Well, hopefully for New York, they have Leo back.
Mm-hmm.
They've been missing her. They've been just sinking. I like Jonquel Jones. I think gets overlooked consistently, and
Most underrated player in the league.
yes, like
Her and Alicia Gray.
This should be a wake up call that like your stats are not the defining factor of if you are the most important to your team.
I'm like, do we talk about Jonquel Jones in the MVP conversation?
No, we did not. We could.
Do we? Should we? I mean, obviously the
Miss a
injury
bunch of games
is,
this year, so probably not.
but I do think at least pre-injury, she should have been in the conversation. Because as far as the Liberty are concerned, it's the offense that's going to steal the conversation. It's Brittany Inescu and Brianna Stewart and, how many threes they drain and how high they can run up the score. But what Jonquel Jones is doing, it's like it doesn't get the notoriety that deserves because it's not as sexy as offense, but it is the foundation to what that Liberty team does. So we've got a bunch of great matchups coming up this week in the WNBA, and we'll be back, of course, next week as we are every single week breaking down the biggest stories in the WNBA. We'll have a Commissioner's Cup recap, what stood out to us, and of course, all of the amazing headlines that we have here in the W. So keep it right here with Yahoo Sports.